All right. Special edition of Moose and Keith right here with you here. Excuse me, on this Tuesday night. Marc Malusis, Keith Irizarry with you. And what we're going to be doing tonight is pretty cool. Real-time fantasy sports. We've got a 12-team league, PPR, single quarterback format, $2,000 entry. Top prize is $12K. 9 starters, a quarterback, 2 running backs, 1 flex, running back, receiver, tight end, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, special teams, defense, a kicker, 9 bench spots. Keith and I, what we'll be doing over next 90 minutes, 2 hours, is we're going to be following along with this draft. And it is fantasy football season, Keith, and this is a pretty cool thing that we're doing here on this Tuesday night.
Yeah, I love it. And fantasy football season, say what you want about all other sports, and you and I cover all the 4 of the major sports, but fantasy football season is always something just a little bit extra special. I think hope does spring eternal, and you kind of wipe away what you did last year. Maybe you were in one of these big leagues for $2,000. Maybe you were in a $5 league. It's pretty simple. When all is said and done, you go out there, you try to draft the best teams that you can. You've done all the research over the last month or 2 or 6 months or 9 months, whatever it may be. You've read a lot. You've watched guys like you and I. You've been on all the major networks paying attention. You're doing it all. And then the next thing is you're trying to not make a mistake, right? Because you and I will talk about that too. Each and every year, there's maybe 1 or 2 players you're higher on, he's higher on, she's higher on, and maybe you're trying to be smarter than the next guy or gal, and you don't want to necessarily do that. But I honestly think that this year, top 2 or 3 picks, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and the first 4 picks are already in. Jefferson, Chase, McCaffrey, and Cooper Kupp.
Oh, and Eckler just went 5.
And Eckler just... There you have it. And Eckler just went 5. So there you have it. We're going to be following along throughout. And Kelsey goes 6. So you got 90 seconds in between each and every pick. You got 18 rounds. So no real surprise. I mean, it's a PPR league. Jefferson obviously is going to go number 1 overall. Jamar Chase 2. Christian McCaffrey 3. Cooper Kupp 4. Austin Eckler 5. Travis Kelsey, who we've talked about right here on Moose and Keith on the Better Sports Network, Keith, is that you look at Travis Kelsey, the chasm between him and every other tight end in the National Football League in terms of fantasy production is pretty large.
Yeah, so the big difference here, and one of the things that I continue to talk about when you're doing these fantasy drafts, are you want to get the player that is that much better than the next one. And what I mean by that is pretty simple. From Travis Kelsey to Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Hockenson, Pitts, whomever you think is the next tight end, it's Andrews, but whoever you think is that second tight end, if you go back to last year, the difference between Kelsey and the next tight end was essentially an average of 6 fantasy points per week. What does that mean? That means a 6-point difference that you're getting. Now, if I were to say what's the difference between Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, that difference not as large. What's the difference between McCaffrey, Eckler, Bijan, guys like that? That difference is not going to be as large. Same thing that I'll throw out about the quarterbacks. And I'm guessing that in a high-stakes league like this, we will not see any quarterbacks go very early at all. I also think that there's something else that is very important, especially in a league like this, where people are spending $2,000 to be in.
$2K.
Yeah. $2,000 is nothing to scoff at, right? So if you're going to be spending that much money, make sure you know all the rules, make sure you know all the points, make sure you know everything. The fact that there's a full point PPR does change sometimes what you're thinking about.
Yeah, here's a question I'd answer the question I'd ask you, Keith. You're a huge fantasy player. What's the largest pot or pool that you've ever gone into?
To be honest, I haven't been in any of the really high market ones.
Mine's like $100.
Yeah, low hundreds for me. I've never been in one of these, in the thousands. I've done a lot of the industry leagues. A lot of times those are not pay for play. It's really just having all of the fantasy analysts in the same pool. I've done a lot of the early ones in the spring that really are kind of silly, but it's essentially a way for us as analysts, fantasy analysts, to be prepared for the season and also to be able to prepare other people.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is, I've never done it. I mean, I give credit to those that do, and I understand there's a big pot and a big pool at the end of it. I've never delved into this, so this is pretty cool for me. Is looking at guys that, I mean, you look at it, it's, you know, you're looking at 12 teams, you're looking at 24K. The winner gets 12. It's a $2,000 buy-in. First round is complete when Jefferson, Chase, McCaffrey, Kupp, Eckler, Kelsey, Bijan Robinson, Pollard from the Cowboys, Tyreek Hill, Amon St. Brown, receiver from the Lions, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb. I have no idea at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, eighth overall pick, how Tony Pollard is going over my guy Saquon Barkley.
All right, so here is why, okay? Because Tony Pollard is going to be in an offense where I think they're going to utilize him a lot. Also, this is essentially you taking a leap of faith, believing that what you've seen in Tony Pollard in the time that he has supplanted Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, Tony Pollard averages over 5 yards per carry. He's going to catch a lot of balls. I understand. I do not think the difference between Barkley and Pollard is very much.
But also, let's also factor in Tony Pollard is now Mike McCarthy's calling plays down in Dallas.
Yes.
So their play caller for the past couple of years is now calling plays in Los Angeles for Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers. So that does have to factor in. You're looking at Saquon Barkley. I know health is always an issue. And you're looking at a Giants team that paid Daniel Jones during the course of the offseason. You know me. I was high on Saquon Barkley a year ago when we were talking about fantasy, and I was telling everybody and their mother, don't sleep on Saquon Barkley. He's going to have a huge year. Saquon Barkley, to me, is a top 3 running back in the National Football League.
Yeah, I mean, I have him as a top 4 running back, which essentially is
you have Pollard in front of him?
For fantasy, I do.
You do? I do. Not.
Yes, I've fallen in love with Tony Pollard, and maybe it's because I've gotten him in a few of my leagues also, but I've really fallen in love. All right, let me ask you a question. And I don't know if it's a straightforward question, but who do you trust more at quarterback, Daniel Jones or Dak Prescott, not to win games, but to make sure that your running back is successful?
Well, I mean, there's more of a resume with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and I think that might, for some people, that might be the subtle difference. If I'm choosing between those two, I will say I'm looking at the board right now. I love what Andrew Hurwitz is doing right now, loading up on Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and I'll turn this one over to you. You cover both the New York Jets and the New York Giants pretty much day in and day out during the regular season, a little bit during the preseason as well. Garrett Wilson is someone that I know you're very high on.
Oh, I think he's a stud. I mean, but you know, and that's kind of stating the obvious is that you've heard Aaron Rodgers go and tell you and compare him to Devontae Adams as a route runner with the New York Jets. Last year, he was the offensive rookie of the year in the National Football League, and he had Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, and Mike White throwing them the football. Now, I understand there's issues or concerns about the Jet offensive line, but you look at Garrett Wilson, as long as he stays healthy, he's a ridiculous wide receiver. And he was in, and I like Chris Olave coming out of Ohio State. I thought he was a little bit better than Garrett Wilson. I couldn't be more wrong. I mean, Garrett Wilson is going to be a huge fantasy wide receiver this year for the New York Jets. I love that pick in the second round and I agree with you. I love the combination of St. Brown and Wilson, especially in a PPR league, because we've talked about this before, you know, right here on Moose and Keith on the Better Sports Network is that when you're looking at fantasy football, especially in traditional PPR leagues, Keith, I'm a big fan of going wide receivers early just because of how combustible the running back market can be across the NFL.
Yeah, and I think that if you get a running back, by the way, early on, if you're going to take a running back in the first round, so I'm seeing what Brian Q just did with his draft choice there. So he took Eckler at number 5, then took Jalen Waddle. I love that. All right, so here we go. This might be one of the first reaches for me. So I'm seeing Mike G, game over, took Cooper Kupp at number 4, which, listen, I think this is one of the biggest tests of where you sit on Cooper Kupp in this fantasy draft, because some people think that Cooper Kupp is going to be resurgent. He's going to be the guy that he was 2 years ago and even early on last year. You're also putting a lot in the basket of Matthew Stafford turning back the clock as well. I'm a little bit afraid of Matthew Stafford. Now, I love Cooper Kupp. I love his talent. I love everything about him, but I'm a little bit afraid of Matthew Stafford. And clearly, if you're drafting Kupp, that goes hand in hand with Stafford being successful. The reason I bring that up is Dameon Pierce and the Houston Texans have no offensive line. Okay. You've got a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud. And besides Nico Collins, who I do love as a late round draft choice, and I think he's a guy that can end up around 900 receiving yards, what else does the Texans have? Dameon Pierce might be a little bit of a reach there.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily love Pierce there at running back for the Texans for everything that you had to say. I'm surprised Olave went that early as well with the next pick in the second round. Then you got Gibbs, who I think is going to be kind of a multi-use talent for the Detroit Lions this year. Don't mind him in the second, toward the tail end of round number 2 there, and pairing him up with Jamar Chase. I think that's an interesting rookie when you're looking at the rookie class this year for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, the only fear for Jahmyr Gibbs is that the Detroit Lions are going to end up using David Montgomery in the similar vein to Jamal Williams last year, and Montgomery could end up vulturing a lot of touchdowns. All right, here we go. You've got your first quarterback off the board in Jalen Hurts. So Jalen Hurts goes ahead of Mahomes, goes ahead of Josh Allen. You've got your second tight end off the board and Mark Andrews. All right, let me read you this lineup now. So our number 1 overall selection, number 1 team drafting was Circus King, P.T. Barnum. Love the name. Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, and Jalen Hurts. How would you feel if you had that trio to start things off?
I like that. I think Ridley this year down in Jacksonville is going to be amazing. I really do. I think the time away after he served the gambling suspension with the Atlanta Falcons, he's with an offensive-minded head coach in Doug Peterson. Everybody that was off the bandwagon of Trevor Lawrence down in Jacksonville are now back on. Ridley's a true number 1 wide receiver. You know how I like Travis Etienne down there in Jacksonville. I'm concerned maybe about usage rate down there in Jacksonville when you're looking at fantasy perspective, but if you're looking at a trio right now and you have Justin Jefferson and you pair him up with Ridley and then Jalen Hurts, who production-wise, I understand Mahomes is the reigning, MVP of the league and easily could be the MVP. Jalen Hurts would have been if he didn't suffer that shoulder injury toward the tail end of the season last year in Chicago against the Bears. Hurts, their offensive line is all the way back. Ground game is going to be there. He's going to be that true, dual threat at the quarterback position. You've got A.J. Brown. You've got Devontae Smith. I love the trio of Jefferson, Ridley, and Hurts coming from the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, so Mahomes goes to the Riddler in his lineup of McCaffrey, Olave, and now Mahomes. The Cup Pierce drafter and Mike G goes for Josh Allen. Devontae Smith then goes Moose. I wonder, because this happens, and we've all been in these leagues, you see one QB going, you get a little skittish and almost feel like you have to start drafting quarterbacks. The QBs on the list still, you'd have, Burrow, Herbert, Lamar, and Trevor Lawrence would be the next group.
Yeah, and of that group, who are you taking?
Burrow.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there's some people that are worried a little bit, the fact that, Joe Burrow may or may not be available for week 1 of the season. Burrow would be number 1. For me, I'm very into Lamar Jackson. I really would like to get Lamar Jackson on rosters this year. I haven't been able to get him in any of my teams. I found myself mostly in the Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence range.
Yeah, I love Justin Herbert. I do. And you know that I'm goo goo gaga for Joe Burrow out in Cincinnati with the Bengals. A little concerned about that calf injury and how that's going to linger.
Even the contract issue right now too, right?
Contract issue for sure. But I'd probably agree with you. I think probably I might lean Herbert. I'm not going there at this stage with my selection, but I understand where you would like Joe Burrow as the next quarterback coming off the board.
So I'm looking and Bernsey and Will are producing. So you guys correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you guys are able to see this or not. But Christopher Bain, I believe, was the first person that has run out of time. I saw the clock winding down. It went red. It went to 0. Christopher ended up taking Najee Harris, and I'm seeing a little clock thing on Najee Harris. I think Najee just got auto-drafted to Christopher Bain. I think he ran out of time.
You might be right about that. I mean, yes, you are correct. Burns is saying that you are correct.
Yeah, wow. So
Najee Harris is your guy.
He was.
You don't like him this year?
I actually have some shares. I do have some shares of Najee again. I do. Yes, I do. All right, you know what? Let's leave it there. I know you want to talk to me about Najee Harris and what Najee Harris meant to me and the Irizarry household last season.
Well, a year ago, you were very bullish on Najee Harris. We'll come back. It's Moose and Keith with you, a special edition on this Tuesday night on the Better Sports Network. We're following a big money, draft tonight, where you draft, and it's 9 total starters, 18 picks in all. And it's a fantastic kind of look-see in a 12-team PPR, single quarterback format, $2,000 entry, top prize. And it's a high-stakes fantasy football draft with real-time fantasy sports. It's Moose and Keith with you, special edition on this Tuesday night right here on the Better Sports Network.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I'm still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like. He's on a pitch count. Like, I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like, even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like, he's still going to get the high value touches. So, yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So, like, if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like, right. Because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, we'll see what happens. We're taking it day by day. We're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
All right, Moose and Keith with you on a Tuesday night right here on the Better Sports Network. And what we're doing is we're following a real-time fantasy sports high-stakes fantasy football draft. It's a $2,000 buy-in, 12 teams. They're drafting 18 players in total. We're into round 4. We closed out the first segment talking about Najee Harris and the Irizarrys a year ago. Yeah. If you were listening to Moose and Keith, we're all in on Najee Harris. Now, on the season, not bad. I mean, he ran for over 1,000 yards, had 7 touchdowns on the ground, had 41 catches, 229 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Did get healthier and a little bit more productive as the season went along. But what about Najee Harris as the clock ran down, going with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pick in the 3rd round?
Yeah, I didn't love that spot for Najee Harris. I think that, Travis Etienne going after Najee, Ramondre Stevenson going after Najee. I think Miles Sanders now and Najee Harris are around the same spot for me. Jonathan Taylor going in the 4th round, we'll talk about that in a second, is a fascinating one for what the season's going to be for Taylor. Even Kenneth Walker with Zach Charbonnet being drafted makes you wonder about Walker. All right, let's go back to Najee because I know this is where we're going to go. So, last year, the Irizarry household, we were very in on Najee. I thought he was going to be an absolute stud. And listen, he struggled early on in the season. But there's, do I have a shoe here? I don't have a shoe here. I was going to show a shoe. His foot was bothered, okay? He was having foot problems.
Yes.
Once the foot healed, at the end of the season, he was a top 10 fantasy running back the last 7 weeks of the season. So with that being said, if you believe that the Steelers are going to take a step forward with their offense, because Trubisky's not their quarterback and Pickett.
And Kenny Pickett is.
I think Kenny Pickett, I don't want him in fantasy unless it's a 2-quarterback starting league, but I think Pickett will be successful. He will be able to do things for that team. You've got Deontay Johnson, who opens things up, and then George Pickens, who is your guy, who may end up being the next 1,000-yard receiver in Pittsburgh. Najee Harris, yeah, I know you do. Najee Harris will be fine. Maybe a bit of a reach there. Also, I would love to know if Christopher Bain was actually going to take Najee there, or if the clock ran down and that was just, unfortunately, the next person that was in the queue or not in the queue. Maybe you forgot to do the queue. Anyway, I don't hate it. I wouldn't say I love it there.
All right, let's look at the picks after Najee Harris.
Yes.
T. Higgins, DJ Moore, Miles Sanders, who's now a Carolina Panther, Travis Etienne, who I like down in Jacksonville, Ramondre Stevenson, and then Joe Mixon to close out the third round.
Yeah, I'm down on Joe Mixon this year. Typically, when running backs are in the league for 5 years and you see their yards per carry keep dwindling every single season, you have to start wondering a little bit. If there's a saving grace, it's the fact that the Bengals really didn't bring back anybody to be his backup. So he's the guy there. I'm not in love with Mixon. I actually would have liked Walker better there that Zeke Moat took in the second pick of the 4th round. I like Ramondre Stevenson.
I do like Ramondre Stevenson.
I really like what Zeke is doing here out of his spot there, taking your guy Saquon. I love CeeDee Lamb this year. We know that our guys over at Fantasy Alarm love CeeDee Lamb, guys and gals over there. Ramondre Stevenson, I think that has the potential to be the first real Patriot running back that Bill Belichick trusts. And then I still like Kenneth Walker. I know that Charbonnet was drafted there. I know that Pete Carroll has made it sound like there'll be a bit of a timeshare. From what I saw from Kenneth Walker, I believe in him.
Yeah, I like Walker as well. I mean, I agree with you, even with the selection. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that are looking for the dual running back. And I think Walker's health is the concern in Seattle. But as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be the guy in Seattle. So I like that pick in the 4th round. 3rd pick in the 4th round. How exactly do you draft TJ Hawkinson, the tight end out of Minnesota?
No, thank you.
You have you're sitting there. You have St. Brown, Wilson, and Etienne, and then you come back with TJ Hawkinson in the 4th round when you have guys like Fields on the board. You have Jonathan Taylor on the board. You have Deebo Samuel on the board, Justin Herbert on the board, and you roll back with TJ Hawkinson in the 4th round.
Yeah, I can't draft Hawkinson.
Can you explain that to me?
No, I mean, I can explain it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I am a firm believer that if you don't get Kelsey or Andrews, I'm not drafting a tight end early enough because I can get Evan Ingram in the 8th or 9th round. And I don't know if there's going to be that much of a difference between a guy like Evan Ingram. Hawkinson's better. We know that. Hawkinson's going to make catches. I know that. But I don't know if he's going to be a difference maker on my team. In that lineup that I have there, if Andrew Hurwitz, I thought it was a great start. St. Brown, Wilson, Etienne. How could I have made that roster better? Oh, Fields or Herbert would have made that better.
Well, can I ask you, how do you not draft?
I mean, risk adjustment.
I understand that, but how do you not take the gamble there on Jonathan Taylor? A year ago, Jonathan Taylor was going in. It was a top 3 pick in most fantasy drafts, and honestly, he was going number 1 overall. You're sitting there in the 4th round, and I understand you've got the contract issue with Jonathan Taylor. I get it with the Indianapolis Colts, but how exactly do you not gamble on JT there in the 4th round with the 3rd pick, and you're drafting TJ Hawkinson?
I would have taken Deebo in that spot. Now, there are a lot of people in the industry that really think that Deebo is going to start taking a step backward. Once he was no longer that dual threat dude, last season they stopped using him in that big back, big wide receiver role. It obviously hurts his fantasy status there, but I would rather Deebo there. The Taylor thing is interesting. Let's have that conversation there. So you mentioned taking the risk and taking the gamble. I believe I agree with you 2 days ago The news today that no matter what,
Yeah.
he'll be
No,
on
I
the
get
pup
it.
and will not be allowed to play for the first 4 weeks scares me a little bit. Let's go further with that. Assuming that he really does have a lingering issue injury-wise right now, and I think he must because they wouldn't put him on that list unless he really did have some sort of injury designation there. So assuming it's true, you have to assume that he's not playing week 5 either, right? So more than likely, you're getting him maybe week 6. A disgruntled running back that doesn't really want to be there. I understand maybe not taking the gamble on him. I actually
Yeah,
do
I mean,
understand that.
I understand, and Better Boss Matt Deutsch points out the JT team has Jacobs and Pollard, though. That is true. You're not wrong about that. I didn't love the Tony Pollard pick, and Keith and I will disagree on that. I would rather have taken Saquon Barkley there ahead of Tony Pollard. We'll see how the season plays out during the course of the regular season. I guess I'm just looking for anybody other than TJ Hockenson. I would have gambled on Jonathan Taylor. I don't mind if you said I'm going to take Deebo Samuel there. I don't even mind if you say, you're going to take Aaron Jones. I don't know if I'm taking Christian Watson, but to me, I thought TJ Hockenson was one of those guys where it's a little bit of a reach. Like, I'm a huge fan of Darren Waller with the Giants. The big question is, and I was at Giant camp earlier today as it was cut down day and got to sit down with the Giants head coach Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones and Xavier McKinney for a special we're going to be doing on PIX. Darren Waller, the question is health. It's not about talent. If he stays healthy, Darren Waller is going to be an unbelievably productive fantasy tight end this year in the NFL. Now, you might say, well, I'm going to gamble. I'm going to fade on Darren Waller because he's not been able to stay healthy, and the Raiders grew frustrated with the fact that he could not stay healthy. To me, I'd rather run the risk and take a Darren Waller than a guy like TJ Hockenson, where we've talked about it. And I get Kevin O'Connell, they want to throw the ball in Minnesota. I understand all that. And you've got Kirk Cousins, but TJ Hawkinson's not going to be the number one target when you're looking at Justin Jefferson and you're looking at a talented rookie in Addison coming out of USC.
Wait, hold on. So you'd rather have Hockenson? You'd rather have Waller on your roster than Hockenson in the fantasy?
I would.
No.
Yes,
Hockenson
I would.
Darren
Waller. Darren Waller.
Do you mean
Waller's going to have a huge? I wouldn't draft Darren Waller in the 4th round. I would draft him in the 5th, and he went in the 5th round. Darren Waller this year is going to have a huge. Take my word for it. Like, I was very bullish on Saquon Barkley. Darren Waller is going to have a huge fantasy season this year if he stays healthy.
I'll bet you a dinner that Hockenson has more fantasy points this year than Darren Waller. Yeah, I don't see Darren Waller staying healthy all season. I like Darren Waller, I do. But
you and I have disagreed on Waller when the Giants acquired him from the Raiders at the time. We had a disagreement.
Yeah, I mean,
I just would never draft TJ Hockenson in the 4th round.
So I agree there. I just wanted to clarify. So if you were drafted, if it was 5th round,
I would take
Hockenson was still
Darren
there.
Waller.
You would have taken
TJ Hockenson.
No, I would take Hockenson. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. For our first legit disagreement of this broadcast.
I would take
definitely.
Darren Waller.
Yep.
But Fields goes after TJ Hockenson. Then it's Jonathan Taylor. Then it's Deebo Samuel, Justin Herbert, Allen Madison from Minnesota. Do you have an issue with him going in the 4th round? Then Aaron Jones, Christian Watson, my guy in Green Bay. I love him. I'm curious about what Jordan Love is at quarterback. And then closing out the 4th round, it's DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I don't have a major problem with Madison. Listen, I think that the book is unread on Madison. We've seen some really good, stats put up for Madison in the 5 or 6 legit starts that he's had for Dalvin Cook in Minnesota. Now he's going to get a chance to be the lead dog. Can he be is the question, right? I actually think there's a steal that happened in round number 5 at the wide receiver spot that I think we can get into in just a bit after the break. So, Moose, we are covering this real-time sports fantasy, high-stakes fantasy football draft. It is fun. It is pretty fast and furious, a lot faster than we thought it was going to be going with the 90 seconds between the picks. You and I have disagreed a little bit about one tight end. I'm going to give you the wide receiver that may end up helping someone win this league that was just taken in the 5th round. We'll do that when we get back. He is Moose. I am Keith. It is Moose and Keith, and this is Better Sports Network.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers, in favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well. Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback, and so that's going to change your strategy a little bit if you have only 2 wide receivers or if you're drafting 3 wide receivers. And of course, the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments. And so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Eckler's, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple of years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world, who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're in the middle of a draft, and you just noticed that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots, is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player, because typically this player isn't going to drop. The average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy isn't my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
All right, Keith, you teased it going into break. Tell us the player that excited you in this last round.
I'm all in on Amari Cooper this year. And yeah, I really am. And here's the reason why. Who was his quarterback last year for most of the season?
Jacoby
Insert
Brissett.
You don't know, right? I mean, it's Jacoby Brissett. I mean, we do know, but you don't know. No one cares, right? Sorry, Jacoby Brissett.
I was bad at testing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was. Actually, you were amazing at tests in high school, apparently. Hey, listen, there was nobody throwing in the ball. It's the same way that I feel about Garrett Wilson, right? Garrett Wilson, you were throwing in the football last year for the Cleveland Browns. I played quarterback for half the season. Amari Cooper still had 78 catches, had 1,160 receiving yards, averaged almost 15 yards per catch, and had 9 touchdowns. Now, the thing that Amari Cooper is almost stat proof on is touchdowns. Even in Dallas in 2021, 8 touchdowns. 20 was not the greatest year touchdown-wise, but had 92 catches. In 2019, 8 touchdowns. In 2018, in the season when he got injured, 6 touchdowns. What I'm saying is this. If you believe so much in Nick Chubb, and if you believe that the Cleveland Browns are going to be competitive this season, that maybe because of their defense, but because of Chubb also, then you have to believe that Watson's going to be able to turn things around. I do. And I don't know. I mean, listen, I'll draft Watson late in the draft if I really need to. But I think that Amari Cooper is someone that could change your roster. And I think Mike G did a really good job there. So I've told you I have my questions about Cooper Kupp. I have my questions about Dameon Pierce. I like the Josh Allen pick in round number 3, ahead of his ADP, better than his ADP. Madison is sneaky good there in round number 4 for him. Amari Cooper, I love it in round number 5. And then in round 6, he just drafted Brandon Ayuk, who is someone that I'm looking at potentially as a difference maker in many people's rosters.
Yeah.
As well.
I mean, Cooper, the only question I have is what version of Deshaun Watson am I going to get?
Fair.
I mean,
Yes,
that's
very
it.
fair.
I mean, if you're going to tell me Deshaun Watson's going to be back to being a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, top 5 fantasy quarterback in the National Football League, yeah, I'm with you. Amari Cooper's great. There's no doubt about it. And, but that would be my only reservation. So if I'm drafting Cooper, and I think he's going to play to that level, Keith, then obviously, and we've talked about it, you and I are kind of both a little bit more bullish on the Browns this year, having a pretty good year. That Deshaun Watson is going to find that form once again, because last year, let's be honest, I mean, he looked really, really rusty. And at times, Jacoby Brissett actually looked better at quarterback than Deshaun Watson.
Well, here's what I'll do. If I said, and let me pull up, I'm gonna pull up the ADP just for. Can I get this just for Q? It's fine. I could do this off my head. If I told you Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Jackson, Fields, and Lawrence. If I gave you all 8 of those quarterbacks and said all 8 would be ahead of Deshaun Watson, do you feel comfortable with Deshaun Watson being at number 9? Do you like him better than Cousins? Do you like him better than Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, and Tua Tagovailoa?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you're telling me Tua is healthy, that's the big thing. I mean, I think Tua is going to be more productive in Miami with McDaniel in that offense than Watson. But the big concern with Tua is staying healthy. Is he going to avoid the concussions? Couldn't stay healthy at Alabama. Has not been able to stay healthy in the National Football League. That's the concern with Tua. I think the Rodgers one is an interesting one because the Jets have obviously gotten a lot of heat. And, we talked about it. Breece Hall has gone in this draft, and Garrett Wilson has gone in this draft. We'll see where Alan Lazard ends up going later on in this fantasy draft as well. Dalvin Cook already off the board, right? So you look at it, what's interesting, or no, he's not off the board yet, but he will be. It's interesting when you look at the Jets, and is Rodgers doesn't have to be MVP Rodgers. He's just got to be significantly better than what they had last year, because, Keith, the defense for the Jets is going to be the reason early on. Like, the defense is unbelievably legit. And they're going to come at you with waves of pass rushers. The kid McDonald that they drafted out of Iowa State, when they didn't draft an offensive lineman, he's got an unbelievable spin move. Quinnen Williams is as good of an interior defensive lineman. They might have arguably, in DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, the best cornerback tandem in the National Football League. Rodgers, to me, is an interesting quarterback when you're looking at fantasy-wise, is that, I think he's going to be a significant, like an astounding upgrade from where the Jets had a quarterback last year. Fantasy-wise, though, I'm a little concerned, especially with the offensive line. He might be better fantasy-wise toward the tail end of the season than he is at the beginning of the year.
I don't want anything to do with Aaron Rodgers from a fantasy standpoint. It's the days of quarterbacks that you can plug into your lineup that legitimately don't run in fantasy. It's kind of over. Like, that's where, the Trevor Lawrences of the world are sneaky good runners. Honestly, the way Aaron Rodgers kind of used to be. You know what? Let's go back to your guy, Zeke. So let's do this. So Zeke Moat got Barkley at pick 11, Lamb in round 2, CD that is, Ramondre in round 3, Kenneth Walker in round 4. Then he drafted Trevor Lawrence, and then Christian Kirk, who is just a reception monster. I like what what Mowat's doing.
I don't disagree. Love Zeke Mowat, the tight end as well for the New York Giants way back when.
Imagine.
I'm a huge CeeDee Lamb fan. Ramondre Stevenson, you talk glowingly about him. We both like Walker the third up in Seattle. Yep. Trevor Lawrence, everyone's back on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon. Christian Kirk, I'm curious to see with Ridley down there in Jacksonville, how that affects maybe the production of some of the other receivers down there in Jacksonville, especially a guy like Christian Kirk. Love him. You were right. He was a receptions machine a year ago, but does Ridley's presence affect his fantasy production this year? That would be my only concern about Kirk, but I have no issue with pairing Lawrence and bringing in one of his favorite targets from a year ago.
Want to give a shout out to our chat and one of our favorites, Jessica Brand. I think this is the best note I've seen in the history of Moose and Keith, and we've been going on
What,
the air
hashtag
for
Team
a
Keith?
year now. Yes, that was at 8:29. Hashtag Team Keith. Can we put
I'm
that up on
offended,
our
Jessica.
screen?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, I know.
Jessica.
She has
is
Watson
the
going at
best.
12, 111 in one league.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
QB 15, she
so,
says.
yeah, I mean, that's probably where. I mean, how big of a gamble are you going to go on Deshaun Watson? I will say this, though, a guy that I absolutely adore, and you have to be somewhat of a Pickett believer. This is the year of the rise of George Pickens. Like, we were going through it on Moose and Keith here on the Better Sports Network, and we were looking at some fantasy futures and some player props, season-long player props in the National Football League. And I think Pickens' number was like in the low 8s.
I think you got it. No, you got it for
was it
$7.99.
Yeah. So, okay. So right there, right around 800 yards receiving. Like, George Pickens is the real deal in Pittsburgh. Now, you got to bank on the idea that Pickett is pretty good at the quarterback spot, but I think George Pickens in round 5 is going to prove to be a hell of a pick. And I'm going to have so many shares of George Pickens this year when I go through my fantasy football drafts.
All right, so that team, let's talk about it. Carlton Myers has in the 4th round got Justin Fields, who
would take in the first round.
Chat. He truly believes Justin Fields will be the number 1 fantasy scorer of all players this year. But let's go through that lineup. So you got Tyreek Hill, who has said he will go for over 2,000 yards this season. He was on pace for it last year before Tua got hurt. If there's a singular player that is so tied to their QB, you get a feeling it's Tyreek Hill. Because when Tua was playing and healthy last year, Tyreek Hill was the best wide receiver in all of football. When he wasn't, he was very, very, very good. Derrick Henry, we wonder
when do you think that cliff does happen?
When that wall is coming.
Like, when does the time, because he's already passed when people will probably jump off the bandwagon. Like, Derrick Henry has taken an unbelievable amount of hits. Now, I will say this. He was a guy that was, in a dual running back system down in Alabama. He wasn't getting the workload, say, of like an Eddie Lacy at Alabama, to where, Derrick Henry was one of those guys that did flash, but clearly people looked at him, thought he was too big, that he was never going to succeed in the NFL, and all those talent evaluators were wrong. But when do you start to see the slowdown of Derrick Henry?
I mean, you'd imagine it has to start, right? And just as simple as this, if I'm going to use the same analogy, the same conversation that I had about Joe Mixon in that his yards per carry is going down, I have to be fair. So for Derrick Henry, let's just go back to 4 years ago when he ran 303 times for 1,540 yards, 5.1 yards per carry. You love it. He was 4.9 the year before. He had his 2,000 rushing season, 378 carries, 5.4 rushes, yards per carry. Then he got injured, 937, but that average was down to 4.3. Last year, as good as he was, it was 4.4. My assumption is this. Assuming he stays healthy, Derrick Henry is still a 1,300-yard guy. But if he's 1,300 yards and gets you 11 touchdowns and, still isn't catching the ball very much at 33 catches last year, maybe he gets, maybe he continues rising, gets to 35. Is that worth your second-round pick? That
would it be to
question.
you?
Not over Josh Jacobs. Those numbers don't make me believe in him more than Josh Jacobs.
Well, let me ask you this. The 3 picks that went after him, Jacobs, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle. Are you taking –
I like
all
A.J.
right,
Brown.
So you would take A.J. Brown. You would take Jacobs. Would you take Devontae Adams ahead of him?
No, I'm afraid of Jimmy G.
Would you take Jalen Waddle ahead of him?
Heavy consideration. Yes. Wow. Dalton Kincaid just went. Oof.
Fall in love with tight ends. We'll continue to react. Moose and Keith with you here on this Tuesday night in the Better Sports Network. What we're doing is we're following a high-stakes fantasy football draft presented by RealTime Fantasy Sports. He's Keith Irizarry. I'm Marc Malusis right here on the Better Sports Network.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in dynasty fantasy football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played dynasty, it has been, I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim, who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
All right, Moose and Keith with you here on this Tuesday night on the Better Sports Network, reacting to a real-time fantasy football, high-stakes fantasy football draft. I don't know why I'm hearing myself back, but I am.
Little echo going on. Little echo going on. Want
to remind everybody, real-time sports fantasy football is make sure to play there this season. Run your league with your rules, choose from hundreds of features, or join a real-time sports league for cash prizes. Formats include traditional season-long best ball, superflex, dynasty, and more. Compete in the fantasy championship for a chance to win the $500,000 grand prize. Go to rtsports.com/alarm. First-time depositors get 100% instant match up to $200. Please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Little update here. Where are we now? We're in round number 8, and we're starting to get some of the younger players going. Also, maybe some of the people that I think people fall in love with. So let's go to Carlton Myers, who had Hill, Henry, Fields, Pickens, Kamara, and Mike Evans, who I think that there's a story to be had there too, because if the Buccaneers are as bad as we all think they're going to be, Mike Evans might be traded at some point this season, which make him really useful in fantasy. What is your take on Dalton Kincaid going so early in this draft? He went in round number 8, and that means he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He was the 8th tight end off the board.
Yeah, a little bit of a reach. I mean, a little bit of a projection. A lot of people fall in love with rookie players. Not telling you not to like Dalton Kincaid. I thought it was an interesting draft choice when the Buffalo Bills made it. Obviously, you're throwing them into the mix in a very, very pass-happy offense up there in Buffalo. They've not been able to find that consistent ground game. Maybe James Cook is able to resolve that this year for the Buffalo Bills, but I don't know if I necessarily love drafting Dalton Kincaid in the 8th round.
Whew. Let's see what you think about this. In round number 9, Cider Hall just took Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, that to me like we've talked about, we went back and forth on TJ Hawkinson in the 4th round. We just talked a little bit about Dalton Kincaid. Like I like Anthony Richardson, and when we were going through the pre-NFL draft and all the combines, he's an athletic freak. I mean, there's no doubt. And I think ultimately he will be successful with the Indianapolis Colts. However, I do think Anthony Richardson is remarkably raw. And I do think he's being thrown to the wolves with the Indianapolis Colts early on in his career. I'm not telling you he can't play. I think he can play. I'm not telling you he doesn't have the athletic ability. Now we're looking at fantasy-wise. I mean, this is a high-stakes league. It's a $2,000 buy-in. You're drafting Anthony Richardson in the 9th round of a high-stakes fantasy football draft. I mean, that is massive cojones when you talk about it. I would never draft Anthony Richardson in the 9th round of a fantasy football draft, no less one that's a $2,000 buy-in.
Yeah, I don't love it. I don't like it either. Now, listen, let's talk about the word upside. Is the upside that Anthony Richardson could be a version of Justin Fields? Is that realistic? If you believe that, I understand wanting Richardson on your roster. But Kirk Cousins, safer pick. Aaron Rodgers, safer pick. Dak Prescott, safer pick. Geno Smith, probably safer pick. And golly, I mean, Tua is still on the board,
you look
right?
at it, right, Tua is still on the board. But so you've had Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, Burrow,
Fine. Those are your
Herbert,
consensus top 3.
Lamar
whatever.
Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. You're looking at him as being the 10th quarterback off the board?
I mean, I don't know. For me, and I've said this in many different things, I viewed this as there are 7 or 8 quarterbacks I want on my roster. Otherwise, I'm kind of waiting.
Yeah. Okay.
That was it. I kind of stopped.
All right, if I don't draft Anthony Richardson in the 9th round, we could throw it out to the chat session. Want to get a reaction to O-Face20, and Jessica Brand is throwing some good stuff in the chat session, as she always does. Let me ask you, Keith, if Team 2 doesn't draft Anthony Richardson in the 9th round there, where do you think he goes?
Well, it looks like drafting a lot of youth here.
Okay, but you look at it. Team 1's not drafting one. Team 2's not. Team 3, Team 4. The only other, okay, so you're looking at Team 7 needs a quarterback. Team 10 needs a quarterback.
Well, all of these teams are going to draft multiple quarterbacks.
I get that. I understand, but you're
yeah.
going to look to fill some other needs before you go to the back, right? Before you go to that other spot. So my question is you can wait at that stage. There's only, when you look at it, there's only 2 other teams right now that are looking for because you draft Anthony Richardson in the 9th round, he's going to be your starting quarterback, is he not? Or are you rolling back and going to draft Tua later on?
I mean, I think he's your starting quarterback, and I think you have to have another plan, though. So if you're Cider Hall right now, you know that you drafted Anthony Richardson in the 9th round. You need to draft another quarterback before you get to the 11th or 12th round, probably. You need to have another quarterback on your roster. Now, maybe the thought for Cider Hall right now is that I have Jahmyr Gibbs. He's a legit starting running back. I don't imagine you're starting both Gibbs and David Montgomery unless you truly believe that the Detroit Lions are averaging 30 points per game. So you kind of struggle there a little bit. Samaje Perine is really just a guy if Javonte Williams comes back and becomes like the guy they expect. So maybe the thought here is that Anthony Richardson is going to get me running back type of numbers. Maybe
he's going to be a wonderkin, or maybe he's going to be a guy that in the last preseason game, what was he, 5 of 17 throwing the football? I know, against the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, and everyone looked at him as, I'm not telling you that he's not going to be a talented quarterback, but we're looking at fantasy football here. I can't draft Anthony Richardson in the 9th round of a draft. I mean, I just can't. And I got to be honest with you, like you look at Hall's last 3 or 4 picks: Montgomery, Jahan Dotson from Washington, Addison, who we both like from Minnesota, Samaje Perine, and Anthony Richardson. I mean, those are picks 5 through 9 of this draft. I don't love that.
I wouldn't have drafted Dotson there. I actually would have taken James Conner, who went after him. And then Addison, so he took Addison over Lockett, which I don't have a major problem with that. But you know what, though? Like, you're Cider Hall, and you really, besides the one running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, you got nobody. I would have probably taken a chance on Isaiah Pacheco. He went after Dotson and after Addison.
Right. Comment from in our chat session. I don't know. I do mostly auctions, but feel like Cider Hall should have stacked in the 5th round with Lamar. Personally, I like Andrew's team.
All right, let's see. Who's Andrew's team? Andrew is Hurwitz. Yeah, that's one of the teams that we did like. And listen, but the bone of contention on Andrew's team is that we both think that Hockenson a little bit early there at number 4. You think very early. I think a little bit early. What I'll say is this. I'm a fan of Javonte Williams, and I think that in Denver, they're going to be smart with him. Javonte Williams is the player that you draft. By the way, I've got many shares of him in my leagues. You draft, and then you understand that he may not matter fully for you till round 4 or round 5.
Right, and then he drafted his last pick.
Oh, no. Why are we drafting
his last pick
defenses?
was Daniel Jones.
I'm sorry.
Right, from the Giants. That was his last pick. So Jones was the 11th quarterback on the board. And then Tua Tagovailoa before and was an MVP candidate. Tua Tagovailoa goes in the 10th round, 12th quarterback off the board. But, you mentioned Javonte Williams. Then he has Pittman Jr., who I really like with Indianapolis, but just concerned about the quarterback play. A.J. Dillon in Green Bay. Then Beckham down in Baltimore. And then Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Odell. I'm just worried that you call it ring rust. I'm worried about him.
Yeah, I would worry about the ring rust with Odell Beckham Jr. I would also worry about the quarterback in Baltimore, who's not been a guy that has been, very, very favorable throwing to his tight end and Mark Andrews. But you've seen a lot of wide receivers grow frustrated with Lamar Jackson down in Baltimore. Not telling you that he's not a good fantasy quarterback. He is. I mean, Lamar Jackson is a very, very good fantasy quarterback, But when you're looking at consistent wide receiver production, that sometimes is where you have a little bit of a drop-off as well, and that's what we're talking about with fantasy football. I think Tua in the 10th round is unbelievable value. Like, I really do. Like, here's the thing. Like, Keith, the concern you have, and I understand it's a massive concern, especially when you're looking at fantasy football. Like, I fully believe if he stays healthy, Tua is going to be a remarkably productive fantasy quarterback. Like, how could you?
He was an MVP
how could
candidate.
Like, the concern is health. So I'm drafting a guy in Tua in the 10th round that I believe is gonna, as long as he stays on the field and stays healthy in McDaniel's offense with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, they are gonna score buckets of points down there in Miami.
I would say that Ezzo's team right now there is a chance that is clearly the best team in the draft. And I know this sounds weird. There's also a chance that it falls flat on his face. So you've got a rookie in Bijan, who I think consensus we're all happy with. Devontae Adams in the 2nd round is good. T. Higgins, solid in the 3rd round. Deebo Samuel, I'm higher than a few others. No Baltimore Ravens running back since the days of really Ray Rice have ever been like truly, truly fantasy relevant. But maybe this is the year with Dobbins. We saw how Rashad White was used in Tampa when he kind of supplanted Leonard Fournette. Scares me a little bit that Tampa doesn't have a QB for real and doesn't have a center anymore. DeAndre Swift, when he's healthy, is awesome. Can he be healthy, and how does he fit with that trio of running backs in Rashad Penny and Kenneth Gainwell? Sky Moore, sky's the limit for how talented he is. I like Evan Ingram, and you like Tua. That Ezzo team fascinates me.
I think it's a really good team. So we're going to take a look at which teams we like so far, our favorite from Keith and I, and maybe Jessica's going to hand out the dunce cap as well to a team that she doesn't like up until this point in time as well. We'll get into that. We'll do that. It's Moose and Keith with you, following a high-stakes real-time fantasy football draft here on this Tuesday night right here on the Better Sports Network.
a Kendra Miller fan. He's running back 46 in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now at the end of the 11th round. I want you to talk a little bit about him from both standpoints. Number one, from redraft. He's in the backfield, same backfield as Alvin Kamara, who we talked about in the first hour, and then obviously Jamal Williams. But as far as dynasty goes too, what should you be doing now if you're a dunce like me and missed on Miller? What kind of offers should you be making for Kendra Miller in your dynasty leagues right now?
Well, the problem now is the news worked against you, right? In the sense that you know that there's a suspension looming. We don't know what that suspension is. So do you try to go after him prior to the suspension, or do you wait to see how long it is?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because the higher the suspension is, the more expensive Kendra is going to be. It gives him an opportunity. We saw Kamara, you don't have to go farther than New Orleans. We saw Kamara take advantage. I remember they brought in Adrian Peterson. They had, what's his name? Mark Ingram.
Yep.
Right? And then they brought in Kamara, and everyone's like, there's no way Kamara's going to be relevant year one. And he smashed because talent comes through. These teams want to win now. They're going to put the best players out there. Kendra Miller comes off of a 1,400-yard season. Like, one thing for me, bulky in fantasy, is if you showed me you did it, I'm going to believe you.
Mm-hmm.
This whole upside thing where you've never done it, I'm over all of that. Like, tight end position I talk about often, that's why I don't invest in rookie tight ends. I'll pay the price for a Kelsey. I'll pay for a Kittle when I know they're going to smash for me, right? Running back, you're looking for talent. You're looking for proven. This guy's proved it. And progression. You look at his career in college, he's progressed every year in the receiving game, in the rushing game. There's something about when you watch him play, and sometimes it's not, I don't have a great stat for you or anything, but there's certain guys when I see him play, something kind of, and he's one of the guys when I started watching his tape and just seeing what he can do. I think he can be an all-around workhorse. He had 224 touches in his last season in college. So, look, we talk about New Orleans. We don't know what this offense is going to look like. They have a new quarterback. They have everything, a whole new situation there. He could come in with Kamara out and just take over that backfield right away.
Want to remind everybody, play at RealTime Sports. Play fantasy football on RealTime Sports this season. Run your league with your rules. Choose from hundreds of features or join a RealTime Sports league for cash prizes. Formats include traditional season-long best ball, super flex dynasty, and more. Compete for the fantasy championship for a chance to win the $500,000 grand prize. Go to rtsports.com/alarm. First-time depositors get 100% instant match up to $200. Please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, so we're sitting here right now as we've gotten into the 11th round.
We're cooking. I got to be honest.
Guys like Tony and it's going pretty fast. We've only had, I think,
for
one
$2,000. I'd be like
far.
sweating every pick.
I know. That's why
you're
you're
right
not
about
in
that.
this.
I don't. I would be sweating profusely. Be like flop sweat.
All right, tell us. Jessica Brand's writing in the chat, so go ahead. You can read what she
Okay,
mentioned,
Dustin.
and then let's react.
This is from Jessica Brand. Dustin, I have some serious questions about how he's drafted. Might get the dreaded draft dunce cap.
That was out of the 8th spot. So that was Pollard and Jacobs with your first 2 picks. DJ Moore,
Jonathan Taylor
went. Yeah, and Taylor, like we said. Could this work if he ends up in Miami and he's going to help you in the postseason? Sure. Is this a Le'Veon Bell situation? We don't know. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not in love with either. Mike Williams, super uber talented, can't stay healthy. Khalil Herbert, Chicago has yet to really give us a sense of why we should believe in Herbert. Deshaun Watson there. Stack, I guess, a little bit with Njoku. And then a Niners defense there in round number 10. I'm with Jessica right now. As I kind of skim through these rosters, I would say that as much as I like Pollard, I don't like Dustin's draft right now, and I don't really like Cider Hall. I think those are the 2 that stick out to me that I don't like as we sit here this minute at 9:04 p.m.
To me, I agree with you. I think Cider Hall would take the dunce cap for me. I don't, and I could be wrong.
Okay.
I mean, maybe Anthony Richardson ends up. maybe ends up being a guy that has a Justin Fields type of year this year for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't love the picks. I really don't. And rolling through them, whether it be Montgomery, then Jahan Dotson down in Washington, and you still got Terry McLaurin. You also got an unproven quarterback down there in Washington. Jordan Addison, no doubt about it. Samaje Perine, kind of hold the fort guy out there in Denver. We mentioned Richardson. Then you've got Nico Collins and Romeo Dubs with the
Nico, I like, by the way. I think that's good value.
I don't mind that, but that's a 10th round pick. But if you go back to the 5th round, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, I don't love the picks from Hall in the 2 spot.
I think your boy Zeke has done a good job. Trevor Lawrence in the 5th round, good value. Kirk in the 6th round, good value. Hollywood Brown, not terrible value in the 7th. I'm not a Hollywood Brown guy, but listen, not terrible value. Dalvin Cook, if Breece Hall is just a modicum of himself, let's say Breece Hall struggles. Dalvin Cook is the lead back in New York. Freiermuth, if you believe that Pittsburgh is going to bounce back a little bit more with the offense, I like Freiermuth. I don't really care for Michael Thomas. And now you're starting to get some dart throws. Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, I would never touch.
I like that roster. That's a good
Ezekiel
roster,
Elliott.
though.
I mean, you look up in New England right now, and the only quarterback they waived Bailey Zappi today. So the only quarterback on the roster is my guy Mac Jones. I do like Mac Jones, not as a fantasy quarterback, but Keith and I have gone back and forth. If you've listened to Moose and Keith here on the Better Sports Network about Mac Jones, Keith thinks he's just a guy. I can understand that, but I think the Patriots offense will look a lot better now that they actually have an offensive coordinator this year with Bill O'Brien. Listen, I like Elliott as being a guy that can maybe get you and steal some touchdowns right around the goal line. I think he's that kind of a running back now at this stage of his career, not buying into the workouts that all of a sudden he found his burst. There's a reason why Tony Pollard and he went, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th overall. Tony Pollard, from a fantasy perspective, has been the best Cowboys running back the last 2 years. And Elliott has gotten in the way. I don't think he's going to get in the way of Ramondre Stevenson up there in New England.
I'll give you my favorite teams that I see as we sit here right now. I think that out of the 5 spot, Brian Q did a really good job. I'm sure he was surprised that Eckler was there. I bet you he thought he was getting Kelsey or Cooper Kupp there. Eckler available. You swoop him up and you say, give me 95 catches again, and I'm happy. Jalen Waddle in a high-flying Miami offense. Devontae Smith is a perfect complement in the Philadelphia offense. Keenan Allen, if you believe he's going to bounce back, great. I like Lamar Jackson there. Actually has some weapons around him. George Kittle, fantastic value in round number 6. I told you, I like Pacheco. I think the Pacheco, and I know you do too, you covered him. I think he has a chance to be something really special there as well in Kansas City if they're willing to go with one running back. Cortland Sutton is the number 1 wide receiver in Denver, at least now until Jerry Jeudy is back. Jaylen Warren is a safety plan in case Najee Harris is the beginning of the season Najee, not the end of the season Najee. Treylon Burks is a solid number 2 in Tennessee. And Quentin Johnston, if Keenan Allen doesn't work out, now you drafted Quentin Johnston. Let's say if Allen gets hurt, you just slide Johnson right into the start. I'll say right away, that's my favorite team so far.
I'd go with Ezo.
Another one I'm looking at.
I'd go with the team we talked a little bit about before the draft, before the timeout. I love the Tua Tagovailoa pick in the 10th round. Evan Ingram down there in Jacksonville, who's found himself, and obviously he's got a quarterback now that can get him the football, and an offensive-friendly head coach and Doug Peterson. You throw in the fact of Sky Moore, DeAndre Swift, White, Dobbins, Samuel, Higgins, Adams, Robinson. I do like what Ezo's doing there in the middle of that pack.
And I don't always like drafting out of the number 1 spot because it's just such long breaks. I think P.T. Barnum, the Circus King, obviously that's not the real name, did a real solid job there. I like Jefferson, Ridley, Hurts. You got the number 1, or at least you're supposed to be the number 1 wide receiver there, right? You got a guy in Calvin Ridley that most people believe will be, 1,200 yard receiver, bunch of touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, as long as he stays healthy, should still be number 1, number 2, number 3 as a quarterback in fantasy. DK Metcalf, tried and true. You know what you're getting out of him. Breece Hall, a lot of people think that if the knee injury didn't happen, Breece Hall would have been a first-round pick. You got him in round 5. James Conner is essentially the only option
Arizona's
there
gonna
in
stink,
Arizona. Now, they're going to stink, but he's
true.
still going to carry the
Yeah,
ball
true.
20 times, right? Kyle Pitts
We're waiting.
is talented. Let's see if they use him exactly. Charbonnet, by every stretch of the imagination that you hear out of Seattle, is that they believe that this guy is going to really push Kenneth Walker. Tanks Bigsby is talented. And then Bateman and Tony are both guys that going into last year, a lot of people thought had a chance to be stars. So I think P.T. Barnum's done a fantastic
Kadarius
job out of
Toney,
that spot.
the factor is injuries. We talk about a lot of it with guys. It's not about talent. He's very, very twitchy, very quick, very, very twitchy. I think Kadarius Toney is a guy, though, who just never stays on the field, and availability is going to be a part of it. Now, Keith, you and I've known you now for, the better part of what, 13 months? Yeah, it's about a year.
It's a year.
Right. We launched the show here on the Better Sports Network about a year ago, right?
Yeah,
so
we met before this, but
I've heard it. Now, let me ask you from a fantasy perspective, the 49ers defense going in the 10th round, the Cowboys and the Eagles defense going in the 11th round, the Bills defense just went in the 12th round. What's your take on drafting defenses?
No, don't do it. And Justin Tucker went in the 11th round. And now you're going to get these defenses. And what's going to happen is that, listen, everyone's going to follow suit. And look, we're getting defenses going.
How are you, by the way, how are you drafting the Patriots defense over the Jets defense?
Because the Patriots defense was so great last year. Yeah, everyone in that division now has a top-tier offense. So you're playing 6 times this year. You're going to play against the Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins. The Bills and Dolphins are going to have 2 of the highest flying offenses all of football. And if you believe in the New York Jets, which many people do, I know Hard Knocks helps there, the Jets offense is going to be pretty darn good too. I like the Patriots. I do. And I in an auction draft, I might even spend $2 on the Patriots. I won't, by the way, but I would consider it. No.
All right. So when do you think the right time to draft defenses are?
In a league like this, you're starting 9 teams. You got 9 bench spots, right? You could have started in round 13. 12 or 13 would be the first time I would even think about drafting a defense.
Even as good as the 49ers defense is, you would never draft them in the 10th round.
Are you sure that the Niners are that much better than every other defense?
To be honest,
that's my question. I know. I'm not. I don't mean Marc Malusis.
I agree
I'm just
with
saying,
you.
like in general,
I think the Eagles are going to get after the quarterback like they did last year. A lot of sacks. I think the Jets are going to be a team that has an unbelievable amount of sacks this year. I really do. They're going to come at you with waves. They've got one edge rusher after another, and they're going to be super aggressive. I think the Jets defense has a chance to be a top 2 or top 3 unit. I can't draft them within the first 10 rounds. Like the first time I'd look at a defense would probably be, as you just mentioned, the 12th round would be the first time, the earliest I'd look at a defense. But, as some people are saying in our chat session, it's also something where I think you can be really successful streaming a defense and looking at matchups as the season goes along.
Yeah, I'm a big streaming defense guy. Like that's kind of how I work. And I'll even do that with my tight end spot. If I don't get one of the top guys, I'm fine just streaming. But so here's the, clearly Dustin's roster. And I know Jessica in our chat is, hating this lineup. Dustin wanted to have a starting lineup. Like that's what Dustin did. So Dustin went with, 3 running backs that he feels that he can start in Pollard, Jacobs, and I'll say Herbert because Taylor is not going to start for at least the first 4 weeks. Has 3 wide receivers, feels comfortable that he could start in Moore, Hopkins, and Williams. So no real star there, but solid wide receivers. Got Watson, then grabbed his tight end and figured, all right, I'm going to go with a tight end quarterback stack here and hope that Njoku can get a bunch of touchdowns this year. And then decided, let me make sure I fill out my starting lineup. I'll grab the Niners or I'll grab a kicker and Daniel Carlson, and I have my backup quarterback in Dak Prescott. I don't mind the value there at Dak Prescott there. I don't mind that, but oh my God, Niners and Carlson didn't need to be
I'm
done.
surprised. Jessica has the 49ers as 1 and Green Bay as 2 as her second best.
No, I think I thought she had.
I have
Oh,
San
wow.
Francisco, Green Bay 1
I
and
have
2. I
San
never do
Francisco, Green
defense
Bay.
anything besides penultimate round. And then here's the other thing. How exactly, and I love Tucker. Like you can make the argument that he's going to be a future Hall of Famer. How do you draft a kicker in the 11th round? How do you draft
No,
a
thank you.
kicker in Daniel Carlson in the 12th round?
No, thank you. Jets just went round 13.
I mean, the Jets, by the way, the Buffalo Bills, can someone let Team 4 know that you're not going to have your best edge rusher available for the first 4 weeks of the year as Von Miller's on the PUP list?
Yeah.
Some odd pickings for
but
2K. I mean, this is a couple of – now, I don't want to be uber critical. We've liked some of the drafts, but, I'm one where at that stage, I'd rather look – instead of drafting defenses or drafting kickers, Keith, I would be one to looking for good value picks of guys that can potentially help my team should an injury occur. After all, this is the NFL. It's the most barbaric professional sport we watch.
Well, even more, how about the situation in Indiana, right? In Indianapolis? We keep talking about whether or not Jonathan Taylor is going to be something. What if Jonathan Taylor never plays a down this year for Indianapolis? Deion Jackson just went in round number 12. He has the chance to be the starter there. Moss, if he can get back from his broken arm, has a chance to be the starter there. The youngster Hull has a chance to be in the rotation. I would rather have some of those guys in these rounds 11, 12, and 13 than go for a defense. How about a KJ Osborne? What if Jordan Addison is not the real deal in Minnesota? KJ Osborne would then be the number 2 wide receiver in an offense that loves to throw the football. I'm there. What if Josh Jacobs missing all this time during the offseason and the holdout or the hold in, whatever you want? I'd rather take the chance on Zamir White there in round 13. Come on, guys. Be a little
I'll tell
better
you, and I understand I was pro-Giant before talking about Darren Waller when you and I got into the discussion about tight ends, and I liked Saquon Barkley over Tony Pollard earlier in the draft. Jalen Hyatt's going to be one been downplayed when and he went off the board in the 12th round. Jalen Hyatt, the speed obviously is real. And the Giants internally are very, very excited. And if you ever have time, I was talking to some Giant reporters today when I was out there at their practice facility in Jersey. Jalen Hyatt's a really good kid. Easy guy to root for as well. Very affable. Doesn't take himself too seriously and this and that. So, he's a really, really good kid, and a good personality, a good team guy. Jalen Hyatt, I don't know. And wide receivers can be tricky. They can flash really, really early. It could take them time to adjust, Keith. The speed is real. The Giants are really excited about what Jalen Hyatt could present to this offense here in year one.
Yeah, I'm excited. Speed does kill, and in fantasy football, if you can just throw the ball out to him and let him run 60 yards, he catches 2 balls for 70 yards and 1 touchdown.
Aaron Rodgers off the board in the 13th round. And pairing up with, team 12, 11, 10, 9, team 9, Aaron Rodgers off the board, drafted Justin Fields early, and now Rodgers, the Jets quarterback, is off the board.
I like it.
Good backup for Fields. We'll come back. It's Moose and Keith with you. We're following along. It's a real-time fantasy sports, high-stakes fantasy football draft. And want to remind everybody, play fantasy football on real-time sports this season. Run your league with your rules. Choose from hundreds of features or join Real-Time Sports League for cash prizes. Formats include traditional season-long best ball, superflex, dynasty, and more. Compete, I should say, in the fantasy championship for a chance to win $500,000 in grand prizes. Go to rtsports.com/alarm. He's Keith Irizarry. I'm Marc Malusis. It's Moose and Keith with you on a Tuesday night right here on Better Sports Network.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players. I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. if I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I was still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101. Well, RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that, even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
It's Moose and Keith with Marc Malusis and Keith Irizarry.
Oh, yes, it is Moose and Keith, real-time fantasy sports, high-stake draft going on right now. We got started around 8 o'clock Eastern time. We're an hour and 21 in, and we are into round number 14. A lot of people do usually believe this is where you can win. I don't think you lose your draft here. I don't think you lose your season here, but it's where you can win sometimes because with so many players that are going to be drafted, I think that's really important to take note of. Let me quickly, just in case you happen to be joining us now. So this is a 12-team league. It's PPR, full point PPR. It was $2,000 to get in per team, per entry. $12K is the top prize. You have 9 total starters, but also 9 bench spots. So do the math there. That is 18 players or positions being filled on your roster. So that really means when this waiver wire comes around, it's going to be slim picking. So that's why, I'll go here. How about this? So in round 14, a team like Ezzo, who out of the 7th spot, he's the 7th overall selection, had Bijan Robinson with his first round pick, gets Zach Moss. Like there's a value. And here's why I say that. Again, I was teasing this before the break. We don't know, Moose, what the deal with Jonathan Taylor will be. He may never play another down with Indianapolis, or he may come back in week 5 and everything is kumbaya and we're okay and Taylor is a stud and you got to steal. But if Taylor is never the running back again in Indianapolis, we don't know who the starter is going to be. It's going to be over the next for week 1, 2, 3, and 4 where we kind of find out. And if Zach Moss, who's the highest touted of the running backs in that clubhouse, becomes the lead guy there and they feed him the ball a lot on a bad football team, round 14, you could win your
other
there.
pick and he backed up Justin Herbert with Jared Goff. Like you go back and everyone loves to kind of poo-poo Jared Goff, and the Rams gave up on him and they couldn't deal with him anymore, and they go out there and win a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. Jared Goff last year, you go back and look at his yards and completion percentage at 65%, over 4,400 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks. I mean, he had a really, really good year for the Detroit Lions last year. At one point in time, you can make the argument, and some were, that maybe he was the best quarterback in the NFC. I mean, he was playing really, really well for certain stretches. Not saying he was better than Jalen Hurts on the whole, but you get the point. I think he superseded everyone's expectations. But I think everyone expected Jared Goff to go to Detroit, basically, fall off the cliff. That's a good pick in the 14th round.
Cider Hall saved themselves a little bit. I like the value of Geno Smith in round 15 to honestly may end up being the starter over Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
I like that. Kirk Cousins just went in round 15.
I mean, that's
He's now the
unbelievable
backup
value.
to Josh Allen.
I mean, Kirk Cousins.
We did this on Moose and Keith. We talked about this. What is it? The last 6 years or last 5 years? Kirk Cousins has been top 12 in touchdowns thrown.
Yeah, let me just look. I mean, you look at, I mean, and everyone wants to, you know, and I get he's gotten paid a ton of money, and everyone wants to react to Kirk Cousins and the amount of money that he's made over the course of his NFL career. But Kirk Cousins as a fantasy quarterback has been really, really productive. I'm just pulling up his stats right now. Think about this, Kirk Cousins. Let's say the last 3 years. 3 years ago in 2020, he had 35 touchdown passes and threw for 4,200 yards.
Yeah.
2 years ago, he had 33 touchdown passes and threw for over 4,200 yards. And last year, he had 29 touchdown passes and threw for over 4,500 yards. I mean, you're getting that kind of production from Kirk Cousins in the 15th round of a fantasy draft. And I'm not telling you, there's a difference between winning a Super Bowl and winning a fantasy championship. I'm not telling you can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins as a quarterback. Can you win a fantasy title with Kirk Cousins as a quarterback? You can.
Well, the thing is, though, you're not gonna have to.
No, I'm not saying. I'm just talking about the fact of.
I know. I'm agreeing with you.
Because I think sometimes, especially in fantasy, Keith, I think people look at it a little bit like you have to take the emotions out of it and what you look at Kirk Cousins as kind of, you know, the franchise quarterback and look at the production. He's remarkably productive. Like in the 15th round, like if you're drafting Cousins and you're going to get a guy that's got Addison, Justin Jefferson, and TJ Hawkinson to throw the football for a coach that wants to throw the football, where they're playing a significant about half their games indoors during the course of the regular season. I mean, and in an NFC that outside of San Francisco and Philadelphia is completely and utterly wide open, and in a division where, I like the Lions. I have no idea what Jordan Love is going to be with the Green Bay Packers, and everybody is telling me that the Chicago Bears are going to be significantly better this year. But I got to tell you, I mean, do any of those defense, like Cousins is going to put up Cousins this year? I'd be surprised if he doesn't have at least 28 touchdown passes during the regular season this year.
Yeah, Mike G has done a pretty good job out of that 4 spot. Cooper Kupp, I told you, I thought I didn't know if I would go with him at number 4. I mean, honestly, I think Tyreek Hill might end up putting up better numbers than Kupp. But that being said, I don't have a problem with it. Dameon Pierce, talented, bad team. Josh Allen, number 1, number 2, number 3 quarterback. Madison, talented. Let's see what he can do. And you just mentioned everything in Minnesota. I love me some Amari Cooper. I think Brandon Ayuk has a chance to flash. I like Dallas Goedert. Rashad Penny, I mean, I don't love having so much stock in the Philadelphia Eagles, especially the fact that they have 3 running backs there. But Juju Smith-Schuster there in round number 9, can he ever turn back the clock? You believe in Mac Jones more than me. Maybe they use him correctly. Rondale Moore, no thank you. Devin Achane is a solid young running back. I wouldn't draft the Bills there in round 12. But then even a guy like Kareem Hunt, we see where he lands. And then Kirk Cousins around 15. I think Mike G.
Let me ask you this. What do you think about Laporta, the tight end in Detroit, going in the 15th round?
Well, it's interesting that Carlton Myers is
and
the
he
one
drafted
that
Dalton Kincaid earlier in the draft.
Yeah, that's a lot of stock in 2 rookies where, I mean, I like them both. They're both super talented, but rookie tight ends don't typically work out. Like that's not, it's pretty tried and true. That's a thing. It hasn't really worked out very well. So I don't know if I love that. Like I kind of feel like if I was drafting a backup tight end for Kincaid, I might've gone with like Chigakonku.
Yes, and
Tennessee.
Good luck, as Matt Deutsch points out in our chat session, figuring out which rookie tight end to start each week, whether it be Laporta or whether it be Dalton Kincaid.
Yes.
I think you brought up a great point as well when you're looking at, impact rookies. Obviously, Bijan Robinson is the guy that fantasy owners love and adore, and Jordan Addison, and we've talked about some rookies here. Tight end is very very, very tough when you're looking at rookie fantasy production, because sometimes it takes a tight end a while to figure it out. You mentioned it before. We talked about it. Evan Ingram went in the 9th round. Evan Ingram was a first-round pick by the Giants out of Ole Miss. Everyone expected him to be an absolute star. He is now in Jacksonville, and Evan Ingram's finally figuring it out in Jacksonville, how to be the kind of reach the talent and reach the accolades and fill the production that he has at the tight end spot. But we're talking about years down the line, and people wasted a lot of picks early on Evan Ingram, especially early on when he was with the Giants, and he was not a non-productive tight end.
You grew up a Washington fan, so I'm going to throw this one to you. We just saw in round number 16, Ezzo, who has your favorite team so far, just took Sam Howell. Thoughts?
I don't know what to. Sam Howell's a guy that at North Carolina, if you go back 3 years ago, he was one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football, and then there was a significant drop off.
Ran for over 800 yards.
I mean,
right?
And Washington loves him. I think Eric Bieniemy is eventually probably going to be the Washington Commanders or whatever they're called down the line, future head coach. I think this will end up probably being the final year of Ron Rivera as a head coach for the Washington Commanders. Howell, I don't know what to make of Sam Howell. I don't know. I can't tell you. I think I like the fact that he's starting. I like the fact that, he's a guy that I'm not exactly, I think there's a fair amount of talent there. I don't know exactly how consistent he's going to be. We've barely seen him play in the NFL. I don't know exactly what Sam Howell's going to be this year.
Good job by the Riddler there in round 16, taking Evan Null. Again, this just comes back to we don't know who the running back is going to be in Indy, whether it's going to be Deion Jackson, who Jessica Brand had noted had a few little pops last year, whether it is a Zach Moss, who's probably the most talented of all the running backs there, not named Jonathan Taylor, or whether it's this youngster Evan Null.
Yeah, interesting one. What do you think about Cole Kmet in Chicago?
I have gone back and forth on Cole Kmet because everything in me believes that he can turn a corner and be a real weapon there. I'm afraid he's just a guy. We need to see, can Justin Fields average more than 160 passing yards per game? Because if he doesn't, then it doesn't matter who the tight end. It's not going to matter. They're not going to get anything unless they get a cheap touchdown here or there. Yeah, I mean, I guess on that roster, as the backup to David Njoku, that's fine.
And not a bad one. I agree with you. I'm not exactly – I think Cole Kmet in theory is better than Cole Kmet in reality.
Yeah. What do you think of this Cider Hall going Mark Andrews round 3 and then coming back in round 16 getting his backup and Isaiah Likely? So you're not really covering –
I do.
You do not
I like that.
So the only problem, though, is – with your bench, you're basically saying I'm handcuffing my tight end, which is fine. You probably have to draft another tight end because
you're going to need a bye week fill-in. But Baltimore last year told everybody and their mother that they loved Likely and thought he was going to be a really good catching tight end when Andrews is out. I'm not telling you he's going to be as productive as Mark Andrews. I'm just telling you the Baltimore staff really likes Likely and thinks that he's going to be a very, very productive tight end. So, but you're right about that. They're going to have to, in that bye week, they're going to have to find themselves another tight end.
So P.T. Barnum and the Riddler are the only rosters that don't have at least a backup quarterback. Cider Hall now has 3.
Here's Richardson, Smith, and Purdy. So now... Right, the gamble on Richardson, even though I thought it was way too early, draft him in the 9th round. Now you back him up with 2 constants, Geno Smith, if you believe that last year was the real deal in Seattle, and Brock Purdy in San Francisco, who obviously is the starter.
Yeah. The Riddler, so if I was betting on this, the Riddler with his last hit, him or her, last pick, did they take a defense yet? No, they didn't take a defense. So they're going to take a defense here, and they're going to go into the season, the Riddler, without a backup quarterback. You're going to go with Mahomes, and you're going to say, the 1 week I have to sit him, I will stream, and I'm willing to get whomever like that may be a Baker Mayfield starting.
We'll come back
kind of
to
thing.
Moose and Keith. He's Keith Irizarry. I'm Marc Malusis. We'll come back for the final couple rounds here of this real-time sports, high-stakes fantasy football draft on this Tuesday night. It's Moose and Keith with you on the Better Sports Network.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers? In favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well. Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback, and so that's going to change your strategy a little bit if you have only 2 wide receivers or if you're drafting 3 wide receivers. And of course, the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments. And so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Ecklers, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world, who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're drafting, you're in the middle of a draft, and you just notice that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots, is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player, because typically this player isn't going to drop. The average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy is in my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
It's Moose and Keith with Marc Malusis and Keith Irizarry.
Want to remind everybody, play fantasy football on Real-Time Sports this season. Run your league with your rules, choose from hundreds of features, or join the Real-Time Fantasy Sports League for cash prizes. Formats include traditional season-long best ball, super flex, dynasty, and more. Compete in the fantasy championship for a chance to win the $500,000 grand prize. Go to rtsports.com/alarm.
I'll say sneaky. We didn't talk about this as much, and maybe I threw some shade to the Joe Mixon pick for Powder Keg out of the 12 spot. Kind of like what Powder Keg has ended up putting together. So Chubb, Mixon, and Gibson as your main 3 running backs. I'm sorry, Chubb, Mixon, Cook, and Gibson, James Cook, that is, as your main 3 running backs. You have Joe Burrow. Then your backup is Derek Carr. Don't mind that at all. I'm higher on Drake London than a lot of people. We like Stephon Diggs. I don't love Diggs and Gabe Davis in the same lineup. Thought you could have fixed that a little bit. Elijah Moore could be sneaky.
Higbee.
Alan Lazard could be sneaky. Higbee, not bad. And I actually think that Grafton Chigakongu, again, I like him in Tennessee. He's super uber athletic, and I think they're going to use him correctly. That's not bad out of the 12 spot. Might have saved their draft a little bit. I don't know if we talked about them enough.
How do you draft Diggs and Gabe Davis?
Don't like that.
Like that to me is I've got to find somebody else. After drafting Stephon Diggs, I got to find somebody else other than Gabe Davis, right?
Well, let's see. Who could you have gotten after Gabe Davis? Cortland Sutton? Would you have rather had Sutton in your
yes.
lineup? I don't think I'd want Sky Moore over him. Would you rather Smith and Jigba? Would you rather Juju? You know what? I might have rather Brandon Cooks. I might have rather drafted there another running back, get the value in a Dalvin Cook or an AJ Dillon maybe, and take one of those guys, or even a Samaje Perine if you want to take a stab at the fact that you don't believe Javonte Williams is going to last the whole season or might struggle early. Yeah, that might
All
have
right,
been
got
the
a couple
option for you.
questions
We're
in our
almost done, by
chat
the way. Look
session.
at this.
Number one from Rolling Loud Highlights: Zach Moss or Deion Jackson?
I'm gonna lean Zach Moss. I think he's gonna get the first stab at being the guy there. We saw him show a few signs his rookie year, then struggled his second year. I think this is going to be his last chance. He's going to go all out. I lean Zach
Yeah, I would
Moss
agree with
very
you. I'd lean
slightly.
Zach Moss. How about from Anthony
Very
Coyle? Why
slightly,
doesn't
though.
anyone like Purdy? 20 points a game last year.
I think everyone's just afraid that we've seen this story before. Like, we've seen quarterbacks be good for 6 or 7 games, and then if they weren't, highly touted, a lot of times it doesn't work. I mean, how many Tom Brady's have there been? Right?
Right.
There
I
hasn't
would
been.
say I would trust Shanahan. Like, it took a lot for them to basically dump Trey Lance. And they did. On the Dallas Cowboys took him and gave up a 4th-round draft choice. I think they really believe that Brock Purdy works in that offense. I'll go back to something that Robert Saleh, when he got hired by the Jets, and they were going to run that 49er offense. And obviously it's different now. They've got Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers. But he said the offense they have is very simple. A lot of quarterbacks can run it. And I think the playmakers, when you're looking at Deebo Samuel, Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, can make it very, very easy for Brock Purdy to be successful.
Yeah. I also think that, and to answer this question further about Purdy, we tend to throw, whether right or wrong, more value on QBs that can run. And the most yards he had in a singular game was 16 against the Seahawks in the divisional playoffs, 4 carries for 16 yards, and really was just one 13-yard run. Otherwise, I mean, he's really a 6 to 7 yard guy per game. So that's where you're not going to get anything from him in the run game. And that's where
Brock Purdy's good for George Kittle. He loves throwing to the tight end.
Yeah, George Kittle was hanging out in my town.
Was he really?
A couple weeks ago? He was, yeah. Kyle Juszczyk and him are buddies, and Kyle Juszczyk is married to a woman from I don't know if she actually grew up in my town, but she lives in my town now. Mm-hmm. So they're married, and they have a summer home in our town. And Kyle Juszczyk will practice at the local field near us. And if the kids get lucky enough that they happen to know when he's there, he always plays. He'll throw the football with them. He'll run with them. And Kittle was there. And Austin and Alex, my 2 sons, happened to not be there that day, but Kittle was there. And Kittle played with all the kids.
That's great. Looks like a good guy. I love hearing stories about the perception of people that you see from the outside that ends up being real and genuine. Draft is over.
Really good dudes.
I'm going with my guy Ezzo.
All right. Look at that. Let me take a quick glance again. All right. So you're going Ezzo again. Okay.
Oh, I love Sam Howell. Commanders defense late. Ingram. I'm going to go Ezzo. Tyler Bass.
I'm going to go with Brian Q. I like Eckler, Waddle, Smith, Allen, Lamar in the 5th round, Kittle, Pacheco value in 7, Sutton value in 8, Warren, a safety valve in case Najee Harris is bad. Quentin Johnston is almost a handcuff to Keenan Allen. All right,
who gets the dunce cap? Hall.
I mean...
Well, let me ask Jessica. Jessica, in our chat session, I'll throw it to you. You can hand out the dunce cap for this draft. High stakes fantasy draft, real-time fantasy sports, 2K buy-in, 24K pot, 12K to the winner. Jessica Brand, if she's still with us, who gets the dunce cap?
I'm looking. My least
It's team
favorite
two.
teams, team 2 and team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and team 8. I don't really
She
love
gave you
Dustin's
Dustin.
team either.
I think it still has to be Dustin. Another bites the indeed.
Yeah, I would say team 2 and team 8 are my least
Yeah.
favorites. I wouldn't say I necessarily love Christopher's team either. The one that he had the didn't he? Yeah, he had the
Taking
auto
Watson and
draft of Najee
Njoku and the
Harris
49ers
round
is a god-awful 3-pick run. Jessica, go like it is.
It's not good.
I mean,
Yeah, it's not good. That is not a good. Yeah.
This has been a
That's-
blast. It really has
Wow.
been. Want to remind everybody, as we have
Good.
been kind of doing something for a first here for Moose and Keith. Special time here on this Tuesday night, a real-time fantasy sports, high-stakes fantasy football draft, 2K buy-in. Ran through it, 18 rounds. And we want to remind everybody to play fantasy football in real-time sports this season. Go to rtsports.com/alarm. First-time depositors get 100% instant match up to $200. Please play responsibly. If you need help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Yeah, and we've got some new stuff coming up for Moose and Keith, so hopefully you guys will follow along with us. Starting in the football season, we will be on Mondays and on Fridays, so we will be recapping all that happened on Sunday in the NFL and getting you ready for Monday Night Football. We'll be on from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern each and every Monday, and then on Fridays, we're kind of recapping what you saw Thursday night and getting you ready for everything that you'll need to know. Obviously, we're going to talk college football as well, but getting you ready for everything you need to know in the NFL on Sunday from a betting standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, give you storylines, tell your stories.
It's going to be
well.
a blast.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Keith, great job. Thanks to Brian behind the scenes and everybody behind the scenes for making this happen. Everybody in our chat session for sticking around with us. This has been an absolute blast. For Keith Irizarry, I'm Mark.
Yeah, Will Schweddy hopped in and helped
Will
produce
Schweddy,
too. So
great job. Thank
Will
you
and
so
Bernsey.
much. For Keith Irizarry, I'm Marc Malusis. This has been Moose and Keith. We'll be back with you next week. Have yourself a Tuesday night. Be well.
Yeah, we will. Safe ride home.